Good evening. My name is Melanie McGacken from the Family Support Center of New Jersey. I hope everyone is well and is staying warm on this chilly evening. I would like to welcome you to the Changes to New Jersey's Service Delivery System for Children with Developmental Disabilities webinar being provided by the Family Support Center of New Jersey and presented by the law firm of Hinkle, Fingles, and Pryor. I would like to go over some webinar details before we start. You will have the opportunity to ask any questions during the presentation by clicking the dialog box on the right-hand corner of your screen. We will do our best to get to as many of the question topics as possible. At this time, I would like to introduce you to Attorney Maria Fisher, who will be leading the presentation for this evening. Maria Fisher is personally committed to the field of disability law. She is the mother of a daughter with multiple disabilities. Maria's legal work focuses on guardianship, estate planning, and helping families of adults with disabilities access and retain appropriate services. She completed her internship at the New Jersey Department of Public Advocate, where she conducted legal research and drafted papers on civil rights, healthcare, education, and administrative law. Welcome, Maria. Maria, are you there?
I'm here. Okay.
Great.
All right. All right, 1 second. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the changes in the delivery system for children with developmental disabilities. I'm sure that most of you have heard something about this. There's a lot of information about all the changes that are going to take place, and the changes will be starting in January, so this is a very timely topic. So we're going to start to go through some of the reasons for the changes and what the state hopes to gain by changing the system so that we have our children being taken care of by DCF and adults with disabilities being taken care of by the Division of Developmental Disabilities. So a little bit about DCF. DCF is the Department of Children and Families. Prior to this, part of their charge was to provide services for individuals who have more under the mental health umbrella than the developmental disabilities umbrella. So what was happening is children were being carved out between two agencies. One set of children were being serviced by DCF and the other by DDD. They're looking to streamline the system by having all children, so everybody under the age of 21 who needs services will get their services from the Department of Children and Families, DCF. This is different because the developmentally disabled population used to be handled by the Division of Developmental Disabilities. The upside of this will be that DDD will be able to focus more on the individuals over 21, which, as most of us who have been in the system for a while know, that that's really where most of the services that the Division of Developmental Disabilities has were provided. They didn't do a whole lot for those under the age of 21. So the hope is that children will have one streamlined place to go and they maybe will be able to benefit from more services, and then the Division of Developmental Disabilities will be able to focus all of their attention on the adults with developmental disabilities. So when is this change going to happen? Well, part of it already did happen. On July 1st of 2012, the Department of Children and Families took over for any child who had been residentially placed. So in other words, any child that had been placed outside the home by DDD was picked up by DCF. It really was a seamless process for the most part to the families, basically a funding source switch. So instead of DDD funding that placement, DCF was funding it. The bigger change is going to happen in January, and it is supposed to happen on January 1st. And this is going to affect anybody who has a child who's under 21 for the most part. So let's start with this. I'm going to first let you know that there's one little segment of the population that is going to be treated differently just for right now, but then we're going to put that aside because it just gets a little bit complicated to deal with that as we're going through. For right now, if you have a child who's between the ages of 18 and 21, it is most probable that you will not ever deal with DCF and that DDD will simply hold on to your child and they will simply stay in the DDD system. The reason for this is the division feels it may be just too cumbersome to transfer them to DCF and then transfer them back. Although there hasn't been anything firm on this, that's been sort of the policy that has been discussed since the start of the changes. So if your child's between 18 and 21, the changes I'm going to talk about right now won't really affect them, and you're really just going to listen to the things that have to do with DDD, and for the most part, you will not see a huge change. So we're really looking at anybody who's below the age of 18, what's going to happen on January 1st. It should be seamless. What's supposed to happen is basically every one of those children who is currently registered with DDD and considered DDD eligible will be picked up and simply changed to DCF. So think of it like a file cabinet drawer. Everybody who's in there is getting moved over to DCF. It should be seamless, and DCF should continue to provide the services that the individuals were receiving. Anybody who is 21 and older doesn't have to deal with any of the changes with DCF, but later on in the presentation we will talk about the changes that will affect the provision of services. So, traditionally, the Department of Children and Families serves children from ages 5 to 21, and their focus has been on providing behavioral supports, counseling, and case management. I'm sure some of you are asking the question, well, my child is 10 or 11 years old and getting respite or behavioral supports right now from DDD. What happens when I go over to DCF? What's supposed to happen is that you are supposed to continue to get the services you are getting now. The plan is for DCF to pick up that caseload and move it over, and you should continue to get exactly what you are getting now. The only thing that will change is who's funding the service. Your provider shouldn't change. The amount of time that you're getting respite for or behavioral supports for shouldn't change. That should all remain the same. And it should remain that way for 1 year. They're going to use this first year as sort of a test year. And they're going to, at the end of the year, try to figure out how to better serve the population. But for right now, they just want to move everybody over and keep things sort of at a status quo. Another question that might come to mind is, well, what happens if I need more services? Or what if I'm not getting services now, but I am DDD eligible, and now I've been moved over to DCF, and all of a sudden I need something? Unfortunately, there's not a clear answer to that question. But what you would need to do would be to contact DCF, and you will have a case manager at DCF, and talk to them about what your needs are, and they will try to provide those needs. However, it's a little unclear of exactly how they're going to deal with any additional need, because right now they're really looking at it as just a move over and deal with what we have, and then wait a year before they actually start to provide new services. So that's a little unclear. Now, for those of you who are not currently DDD eligible for one reason or another, and you may be wondering, well, now what do I do? I'm not DDD eligible. I won't be moved over and switched to DCF. How do I become eligible or get services for my child? Well, here, DCF eligibility process up until now has been a little bit different. For those of us who are eligible in the DDD world, we know that you register your child, you meet certain criteria, and then you're sort of in their roles, and when you need something, you go to them and you ask for whatever services you might need. DCF works a little differently today. What they have is sort of a registration process, and it's more crisis intervention. This is going to change. They are supposed to use the same criteria that DDD has, and they should be having a registration process. You'll basically be able to call, start the registration process, and have your child registered with DCF. So going forward, anybody who's never been registered with or applied to DDD will simply apply to DCF and will start there as far as getting their services. For those of you who are unaware of what the eligibility criteria for DDD is, I'm just going to go over it because it's important so that we all know exactly what that is. Basically, you need to have mental or physical impairment that manifests before age 22, that is likely to continue indefinitely, and results in substantial functional limitation in 3 or more of the following areas: self-care, receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction, capacity for independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. So DDD's criteria is now going to be used by DCF when they're evaluating individuals with developmental disabilities for eligibility for their services. So who should register with DCF? Any child with a developmental disability between the ages of 5 and 21 needs to register with DCF. Again, if your child was already registered with DDD, you do not need to register, you do not need to apply to DCF. You will, however, in some cases need to reapply to DDD, and we will talk about that too. Are there any questions on the DCF side of this?
Hi, Maria. Yes, we actually do have quite a few questions coming in already. Are you ready for the first one?
Okay. Do you want to?
Sure. Let's see. When they move someone to DCF for a few, would they move someone to DCF for a few months, then back to DDD at the age of 21?
No, that is not the current plan. The current plan is anybody who is 18 or over will not be moved over to DCF. They're just going to keep you with DDD. So no, that's not the plan.
Okay, and the next question is, will children who are now in the DDS hotline mode be moved to DCF?
The children who are in the DDD?
In DDS.
Oh, okay, yes. DDS, we'll just step back for a second. Let me just, in case some people are not aware of DDS. DDS was just sort of DDD's way of handling a large caseload. So those cases who were not active cases, so if you were eligible with DDD but were not receiving any services, instead of having a caseworker have a large caseload with a lot of inactive cases were moved to DDS. Those cases also, if you're below the age of 18, the DDS caseload will also be moved over to DCF. So yes, those cases are included in what's moving to DCF because DDD is no longer going to service anybody below the age of 21 except for this little special group who's 18 to 21 right now. That group is going to be handled differently.
I have another question. It says, yes, when will we be in contact with our DCF case managers?
Letters are supposed to go out shortly after the first of the year, but considering the volume of cases that are being moved over, I wouldn't expect it to be right away. So probably during January and February, letters will be going out advising you that your child has been moved over to DCF and advising who the case manager is. DCF I know a lot of us call DDD and you get a voicemail or you don't always necessarily get a return call. DCF system, because it's always been a crisis management system, they're much more accessible. You can get someone on the phone, in some cases even 24 hours a day. So that's going to be a little bit different. They feel that they're going to give a higher and better response time. So you should be able to get in touch with your case manager, and everybody will be finding out by letter in the early part of next year.
Thank you, Maria. If you want to go on with your presentation, we have a lot of questions coming in. I think that some of them are going to be addressed towards the end of the presentation. So whenever you're ready for more questions, just let me know.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the changes in the system for individuals who are actually staying with DDD. Because in addition to the changes with the younger children going to DCF, DDD is changing the way they're going to deliver services to the population that they're now serving. So first of all, you will not be allowed to apply to DDD anymore until you reach the age of 18. So for any individual who is under the age of 18 who is applying to DCF and they're starting out as a DCF client and never been part of DDD world, when you're 18, you will need to apply to DDD. Your DCF eligibility does not automatically give you eligibility to DDD. Additionally, and this is a really important point, anybody who is currently DDD eligible and is moved over to DCF but was born on January 1st, 1997 or after that, so anybody who's like 15 and under, you will not be considered to still be eligible on the DDD side of it. So those people who are 15 and under who get moved over, they're going to have to, at 18, reapply to DDD. Your eligibility that you already have with DDD is not going to continue. For those individuals who are above that, who are like 16 and up, they're allowing your eligibility with DDD to remain. And part of the reason for that is most likely because transition services begin at age 16, as we'll discuss in a few minutes with what DDD services are going to look like. But it's really important to know that if you're 15 and under, you will have to reapply for DDD, even though you may have already applied, been found eligible, been moved to DCF, and received the same kinds of services DDD would have provided. You're still going to have to reapply at age 18. Sorry, I forgot to change the slide there, so we'll catch up now. So the provision of services for DDD now will be transition services beginning at age 16. And these types of services are really going to be information and training with an emphasis on employment. Now the question always comes up when we talk about this is, well, if we're not going to be registering for DDD until we're 18, how is DDD going to know about us at 16 to start giving us these transition services? Well, it's going to become on for the parents to actually be proactive and see what DDD is offering as far as transition services. And these are going to probably be a lot of like workshops so that parents are aware of the type of transition services that will be available. You're going to have to see how that kind of plays out. It's a little bit in flux right now since this is all new. But that's really the start of it is at age 16. Prior to age 16, they won't be doing anything. Now, between 16 and 21, any other types of services will still be being provided by DCF. The only thing DDD will do is the beginning transition services. After age 21, DDD will be doing day programs, respite, assistive technology, environmental and vehicle supports, behavioral supports, community-based supports, occupational and speech therapies, and transportation. So it's the same type of services that they're presently providing. They will be providing for individuals over the age of 21. The key thing that's changing is how we're going to get those services from DDD. DDD is changing to a complete Medicaid-based funding program. Again, this is extremely important for parents to be aware of. When we have they have a comprehensive waiver, which is a Medicaid program, and DDD is only going to provide services to individuals who are eligible for the waiver. The service that they're getting has to be a waiver service, and the provider must meet the waiver requirements. The key thing for parents to be concerned about is Medicaid eligibility. Because if you're not eligible for Medicaid, you will not be eligible for the waiver, and the division is taking a position that they will only be servicing people under the Medicaid waiver, which could mean that you would not be eligible for services. So what is waiver eligibility? It's the same as Medicaid eligibility. So you have to have low income and low resources. For most individuals with a developmental disability, you receive Medicaid by virtue of the fact that you're eligible for SSI. SSI requires you to have a disability, have low income, and low resources. At the age of 18, the individual's own resources are the only resources that count. So for the most part, that's the age when an individual with a developmental disability would be eligible for supplemental security income. At the same time, you become eligible for Medicaid. If you're eligible for SSI in the state of New Jersey, you are also eligible for Medicaid. If you have that, then you would also be eligible for the waiver. So that would allow you to get services from the Division of Developmental Disabilities. The problem becomes if individuals have income that precludes them from getting SSI, or if they have resources which put them over the resource limitation, which would preclude them from getting SSI and Medicaid. So parents have to be extremely careful that they don't save any funds in the child's name, that the child doesn't have resources. And we'll talk at the end ways that you can protect your child's eligibility. But this is becoming more important because the division is trying to simply fund all of the services through the Medicaid waiver. So for those of you who are not familiar with what a waiver is, I'm going to just give a little information on that because you're going to be hearing a lot about it. And there's actually two waivers that we'll be dealing with under DDD. The comprehensive waiver is the new one, and then there's a community care waiver, which has been around for a while. In either case, Medicaid is a federal program that is state administered, and when a state is using Medicaid, they have the ability to do some special. The federal government will say, this is what you need to do if you're having a Medicaid program. And then a state has the ability to have an application for a waiver, which allows them to offer different services through the Medicaid waiver and still get reimbursement from the federal government. It's basically almost a 50-50 split between the state and the federal government. The state of New Jersey has the comprehensive waiver, which just started, and this is what they're using for the support support services that they will be giving, which is the day what we can traditionally talk about as our day services. The community care waiver is the waiver that will service individuals for residential services. In either case, again, it's important not to have resources over $2,000 and to have low income, because otherwise that will make you ineligible to be on the waiver, and therefore will put you outside of what the division wants as far as to give you the services that you need. Comprehensive waiver is going to look a little bit different than what we're used to right now. So currently, individuals can, who reach the age of 21, who age out of their educational entitlement and are looking for day program supports from the division, have two options. The first option is a traditional day program. So this would be someplace that you would go, maybe a sheltered workshop or supervised employment, but it's sort of, you kind of get picked up, you go for a certain amount of hours during the day, there's supervision and support there, and then you're brought back home. The other option, which a lot of families take advantage of, is the self-directed day services budget. So that works a little bit differently. The division assesses an individual's level of need and with that information, determines a budget amount that should be able to support that person's day program time and allow them to use it in a more flexible way. It kind of customizes the day program to what the individual may want. So maybe they're going to do some work on some days and need a job coach, and maybe they're going to take classes on another day. It allows them to sort of do something that's a little bit different. Both of these programs are kind of being brought together in the new program, the support program that DDD is now rolling out under the comprehensive waiver. The support program is going to allow a certain amount for employment services and day services, and then there's going to be an additional budget that will allow for individual services that one may need, like respite, or just there's some other types of services that would be unique or individual to a specific person. So it wouldn't necessarily be just a blanket kind of fit. And those budget amounts would be $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000, and that would be in addition to whatever the day program piece would be. So this is a new way for them to provide services, for the division to provide services, and it almost seems like they're trying to mesh together the two programs that they have right now. It's a little hard to say how this is actually going to work since it's all brand new and it's not really being used yet, but this is what we'll be seeing come 2013 when the individuals are aging out of the educational entitlement. This is really going to be the program that everybody will be serviced under for day services. Are there any questions on the provision of day services?
Maria, I'm hoping that this, I believe, was covered a little bit before, if you can just clarify. The question is, what about children under the age of 15 who are currently on a community care waiver? Would they be able to stay with DDD?
Can I ask a question back to that? When the person says they're currently on the community care waiver, does that mean that they're currently in a residential placement? Or do they just mean that they're on the community care waiver waiting list?
I will wait for them to respond.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's not a problem, not at all. Like so, I will definitely wait for that response, and I'll ask that question in just a minute. I do have another question. It says, will DDD continue residential services to children receiving them already?
Yes, a child who is already receiving residential placement, residential services, if they're placed out of the home and they're under the age of 21, more than likely that child has already been switched over to DCF, and the parents may or may not have gotten a letter stating that, but that was supposed to happen as of July 1st, and that was supposed to be very seamless. So yes, if you're getting services now, it's supposed to just be a complete switch, and it's just a switch in the funding source. So it's supposed to be transparent to the family, so they should continue to receive residential services in the exact place where they're getting them now, and there really should not be any problem with that.
Thank you, Maria. I will let you know when you open it up for questions again if I get a response to the first one.
Okay.
Thanks.
Since it came up that we're talking a little bit about residential and the community care waiver, I'm going to talk a little bit about the community care waiver too, because it's again extremely important that everybody kind of understands. So the community care waiver is different from the comprehensive waiver. The comprehensive waiver is being used for day services. The community care waiver is the mechanism that is used by the division to fund residential placements. And it's not just the residential placements for the younger children, it's for the adults in the system too. So the comprehensive care waiver, again, is a part of the Medicaid program, so you have to have those same eligibility criteria. And the division is now moving towards a system where they only want to service individuals in residential placements who are eligible for the waiver. They don't want to do state-only funding anymore, because that puts the entire burden of the cost of the placement on the state of New Jersey, whereas when they use the comprehensive waiver, when they use the community care waiver, that allows them to share the cost with the federal government. A recent change was the priority waiting list has now been switched over to what's called the community care waiver waiting list. And this is an important change because in the past, when you get to the top of the list, of the priority waiting list, an individual would be offered either self-directed residential budget or a traditional group home placement or some type of residential placement, whether it be a group home or supervised living arrangement, whichever was best for that individual, that's what they would be offered. This has changed now, and when you get to the top of that waiting list, you're actually given the application for the community care waiver. So it doesn't necessarily mean that when you get to the top of the list, you're going to be placed in a residential placement. It means you're going to get the application, which will then allow you to be eligible for the correct funding to get a residential placement. But then there'll be an assessment done to see if you are in need of a residential placement. So that's a little bit of a change that's going on right now that's also extremely important. We'll talk a little bit about, as I said before, ways to protect eligibility, because this is going to become vital for any of the older individuals who are staying under the DDD system or those who are going to age out of DCF eventually and end up in the DD system. You have to, parents have to be aware that one of the major things that could impact eligibility is an inheritance being left to an individual with a developmental disability. So what you need to, as a parent of a child with a disability, you need to do estate planning. Your estate planning needs to include a special needs trust, because the special needs trust allows you to leave assets to your disabled child without having it affect their eligibility for Medicaid, Social Security, and both of the waivers that we have been talking about. So it's very important that you look at that carefully and you make sure that you have an estate plan that includes a special needs trust. You also, a lot of parents are right now receiving letters and notification about trying to become eligible for the support, for the comprehensive waiver, so they can get their day supports, including parents who have children who are older, over 21, who are already receiving day services. And some of them are running into situations where they've never been Medicaid eligible for one reason or another, or just never had Medicaid before, and they need to look at that. And there are definitely things that can be done. So for instance, sometimes a child is not considered to be Medicaid eligible because they may be receiving not SSI, but they may be receiving Social Security benefits under their parents' work history, and therefore receiving a higher amount. And that amount disqualifies them as unearned income from SSI, and therefore doesn't have them on Medicaid. There are ways around that particular problem, in that there's a rule that says that if the person would otherwise be eligible for SSI, but simply because of the fact that they have are receiving old age survivor benefits at a higher amount, that they should still be entitled to that eligibility. So don't just, if you hear right away that there's a problem and they say, oh, your Social Security amount is too high, you got to look into it a little bit further to make sure, because there are definitely ways to look at that and potentially still be Medicaid eligible. It's going to become crucial that everybody really looks at Medicaid eligibility. Now, that's not the same in the world of DCF. DCF does not provide their services based on Medicaid eligibility only. And the reason for that is, under the age of 18, the eligibility is not based simply on the disabled child's own resources and income, but based on that of the family. So for the most part, individuals under the age of 18 are just not eligible for SSI and not eligible for Medicaid. So DCF doesn't condition their services on Medicaid eligibility. However, there are some individuals under 18 who would still be eligible, and if they are, DCF may ask you to do the applications and become Medicaid eligible, because that again helps them as far as cost sharing between the state and the federal government. But it's not the same push and importance that it is in the DDD system, where services are going to be contingent on you being Medicaid eligible. Did you get a response back to that question, or?
I have not yet. I'm sorry. I do have another question though, Maria, if you're ready.
Okay.
Okay. It says,
okay. That would be great.
Great. It says, in regards to the need to reapply for DDD services at 18, what if my child is already on the priority waiting list for housing? Will that spot be lost?
That is a phenomenal question, and it's one that we are looking at right now. It's a very interesting question. I don't actually have an answer for it, and I'm not sure if the division has an answer for it. But I would venture to guess that anybody who's already on the list should be left on the list. But again, and this is a little bit of the difficulty with this topic, is that there's a lot of open questions. There's a lot of open questions that we can't particularly answer, only because not all the rules have kept up with the policy changes that have been coming along. So for instance, the DDD is in the process of setting out all new rules for their eligibility. DCF hasn't quite done that yet. And these kind of questions like this one, where what happens if I'm already on the priority waiting list and now I'm moved over to DCF? Do I stay on the priority waiting list, or do I lose my slot? That's not answered in the current information that's coming out from the division. So that's something you're going to kind of have to stay tuned. We're going to have to watch and see what happens. It's a fabulous question. I wish I had an absolutely better answer for that. Are there any other questions?
Maria, we do have a lot of questions coming in. They're actually trying to group by topic because there are so many. So if you want to move on with the presentation, by all means, like I said, we are trying to group. And just to everyone who is typing in the questions, if we do not get to your question this evening, I will absolutely be forwarding all the questions to Maria. She will give a response, and we will make sure that you get a reply.
Okay. If you had some questions, it would probably be good just so I can get a feel for what everybody wants to still hear about. So even if they're not grouped, if you had a few, that would probably be helpful.
Sounds great. So let's see. Okay, so here's one. It says, what if you are receiving funds from the community care waiver and we're on a waiting list for housing? Now they took you off the list because you were already on the community care waiver. How will you get the residential placement?
Okay, this is a great question. Here's the difference between the world of DDD and the world of Medicaid. DDD is what we call a world of eligibility. And Medicaid, the community care waiver, actually creates what's called an entitlement. So when you're under the Medicaid community care waiver, you're entitled to those services that you need. And when you're in the world of DDD eligibility, you're eligible for services, but if the division can't provide them, then you can be put on a waiting list. So now what's happening in your case is you were on the priority waiting list and you were waiting to get to the top so that you could get housing. And the division changed the list, as I said before. So now you're not waiting for housing, you're waiting for an application for the community care waiver. So because you're already eligible for the community care waiver, you must, at some point, you must have applied, or I'm not sure how it happened, but you were already eligible for the community care waiver. There's no reason for you to stay on that waiting list, because all you're going to get is an application that you've already obviously filled out since you're already eligible. So how do you get your residential services? The letter you got should have talked about the fact that you are now entitled to any services that you need. So that all you need to do is to request an assessment. If the division comes out and assesses the fact that that the individual does need residential services, then they are entitled to the residential services at that time. The next question that typically comes up, because we've been helping a lot of families with this particular letter that's been coming out, is, well, how do they assess that need? Well, it really is based on the individual with the disability and what their level of functioning is and how they're functioning within the home. For the most part, a lot of times we're getting this question, the individual is at home, and there's two things going on. The individual with a disability is aging and needs more help, and at the same point, the parents are aging, and the parents are unable to give the kind of support that they have been giving previously just because of the aging process or possibly their own health. Both of those things are looked at. Medicaid looks at the needs of the individual as well as what they call the informal support system. The informal support system would be the family and what supports are there. So if the person isn't able to get the support that they need within the home, and this assessment takes place, and that's what's determined, then the individual would be assessed in need of a residential placement and would be, under the community care waiver, would become entitled to that placement, and then the division would either offer a traditional placement, supervised apartment, a group home, or can offer self-directed residential budget to put supports in the home for the individual. So the self-directed program for residential is a budget that is meant to give you the support you need in the home. It will not cover, though, the home itself, because the way it's worded is to support the individual in their own home. So if you have a disabled child who's still living at home and you're assessed to be eligible for residential services and you opt for the self-directed, that money can't go to rent or the mortgage or anything like that. But what it can go for is people to come into the home to provide supervision or to provide support and care with activities of daily living, or whatever types of support the individual might need in the home. So that's a long answer, and the short answer is you're off that waiting list because you don't need to be on it because you already have what everybody else is waiting for. And what you need to do is to ask for your assessment so that you can determine whether or not, it can be determined whether or not a residential placement is actually necessary at this time. And additionally, if they come back and say that it's not, these are all what's called appealable issues. So if you think that it is necessary and that the assessment is incorrect, that's something that can be appealed. At that point, you would probably want to contact an attorney because you are appealing. It would probably just be helpful. But you can appeal a decision, of the assessment of whether or not it's appropriate. Any other questions?
We do, Maria. Let's see here. Someone was asking if they have over the amount allotted in a bank account and they are applying for Medicaid. Can they quickly remove that money to become eligible?
That's a really good question. This Medicaid eligibility is different than Medicaid eligibility that people are used to hearing about, which is when somebody who's over the age of 65 is trying to become Medicaid eligible for nursing home care. So if the money that's in that account actually belongs to the disabled individual, and it's hard for me to say because I don't know where it's come from, but if it's actually vested in them, What you need to do is it needs to go into a special needs trust that has a payback provision. If that's not the case, if it's funds that maybe are in a joint account with the parent and the child, and they're not necessarily the child's funds, then those funds can be moved. It kind of depends on who's the owner of those funds. So it's a little difficult to answer that question without a lot more specifics. But for anybody who has younger children, you just don't want to be saving money in your disabled child's name, because those resources will hurt their eligibility for any benefit that is means tested.
Okay, Maria, are you looking for another question?
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Just let me know whenever you're ready. The next question would be, my daughter is 21, getting self-directed services, but she has Medicare, not Medicaid. Will her services change?
If she has Medicare, she still will need to be eligible for Medicaid for the community care waiver. Not the community care waiver, I'm sorry, for the comprehensive waiver, so that she will be able to get the support program. And just because she's Medicare eligible doesn't mean she can't be Medicaid eligible. She can be a dual eligible. Again, this is the type of question that I would need to have a little bit more information. I'm going to take a guess at why she's Medicare eligible. I could be wrong on this, but this is typically how we see this kind of play out, and maybe this will help help the person who asked the question. Sometimes an individual is Medicare eligible because they're receiving Social Security Administration benefits under one of their parents' work history, either a parent who has retired or maybe is disabled themselves, or who has passed away, and they have been receiving under the parent's work history for a period of 24 months and have now gotten Medicare. Sometimes the amount that they're receiving from Social Security is high enough that it eliminates their supplemental security SSI benefit, and that removes their Medicaid eligibility. But as I mentioned before, if the only reason that the individual lost their SSI was because of receiving the old age survivor benefits, they're considered to be a dual eligible, and you need to contact the Board of Social Services, and they should be able to reinstate the Medicaid as well as the Medicare, and she should be able to have both, and that would show that she has the eligibility for the comprehensive waiver, and she should not end up having a problem with her day program. However, if that's not the case, if there's some other situation that's going on, because again, I don't know the facts behind that, you need to look into that. You need to look into it sooner than later, because you want to make sure that there's no interruption in her day program. And one thing that the division has been very clear on is the inability to qualify for Medicaid could cause an interruption in services. So anybody who's having an issue with Medicaid eligibility, it's not the kind of thing you want to wait on. You definitely want to be looking into it and trying to figure it out as soon as possible. And if you have another question?
We do, we do. Well, since you are on protecting your services with the special needs trust topic, I do have another question in that area. Let's see. It says, what advice can you offer in order for me to deplete a custodial account that was set over 17 years ago with the intention of using it for my child's college fund, and prior to realizing that he has a disability?
What needs to happen with those funds is those funds would need to be put into a special needs trust. There are two different kinds of special needs trusts. There's a special needs trust that is set up by a third party, and that's typically the type of special needs trust that you would see with an estate plan. So in the estate plan, thought is that when the second parent passes and the assets that the parents have accumulated during their lifetime are passed on to the child, those need to go into a special needs trust, not vest directly in the child with the disability, because that would ruin their eligibility. The other type of a special needs trust is one where when the assets have already vested in the child. So if you're, and I don't know what type of account this is in, if it's in a 529, the answer would be different, but I'm assuming that it's just in a regular account that you were saving. So if you're saving it in a regular account, and if the account is in the name of the child only, you would need to put those funds into a special needs trust that has what's called a payback provision in it. So what that does is, because the money vested in the individual with the disability, the government allows you to put that into a special needs trust, which you can use during the child's lifetime. However, at the end of the child's lifetime, any of the funds that are left in there would go back to the government to amount up to whatever they have paid for services that were provided to the child through Medicaid. So if the funds are being held in an account that belongs to the child and those funds have vested in the child, that would be the way you need to handle that. Now, I mentioned before, if it's a 529 plan, it's a little different. 529 plans, you have to look at them, and it's dependent on who the owner of that policy is. If the owner is the parent, then the funds are not considered to be that of the child, so then those wouldn't even be an issue for the child's eligibility, so then that would not be a problem. Any other questions?
Maria, if you're ready to move on with the presentation, like I said, they're still trying to group. I don't want to give you anything that you're going to be addressing later in the presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
Actually, it really covered kind of most of the changes with DCF and DDD. So if we could stick with questions, that would probably be better.
That I'm sure that the attendees would love that. Like I said, we have an abundance of questions coming in. So let's see.
Okay,
so you know, why don't we just stick with the questions? If there's another area that you feel you need to address a little bit more, just let me know, and I'll hold any further questions at that point.
That would be perfect.
Okay. So what if a child is left money by a grandparent? Will they take away the services?
Yes. Yes. That grandparents should be told to leave. First of all, if the parents have set up their estate plan, the parents need to let any relative who may leave funds directly to the disabled child not to leave them to the child, but to leave them to the trust that the parents have set up as part of their estate plan. An inheritance from anyone to the disabled child will interrupt their eligibility. And additionally, if the individual is already receiving services from the division under Medicaid, the division can actually has a recoupment statute, which means that they are allowed to recoup any of the funds for the services that were already provided. So they can actually make a claim against the money that's being left to the child, and it could end up going directly to the division. So you definitely do not want anyone leaving funds to the disabled child. Another thing to look at, sometimes when grandparents are setting up their estate plan, they really leave it to their children, but then they use the language per stirpes, which basically means that if, I'm trying to make this clear. So you have the grandparent, and then let's say they have a daughter, and that daughter has 3 children, one of whom is disabled. The grandparent may be leaving it to their daughter, but it may say per stirpes. If the daughter predeceases her parents, that means that those funds would go to her issue. And if it's not clearly stated that the amount that would go to the disabled child would go into a special needs trust, that disabled child will inherit directly. And that would also have an impact on their eligibility. Those funds would also be subject to the recruitment statute. So if that's what's going on in a grandparent's will, the parent needs to say to them, but you know what, that's going to go out to my disabled child. You need to word that differently. So it can go for certain or to the other two kids, but the amount that would be left to Johnny needs to go to the special needs trust, and that needs to be clearly laid out in the grandparents' will also. So you want to be very careful that anyone who may leave any kind of assets to a disabled child understands the importance of their maintaining their eligibility and understands that you have an estate plan that is set up and that you have a special needs trust and that that's the mechanism that they have to use in order to leave those funds to the disabled child.
Great, thank you. The next question, I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction. How would the Medicaid Comprehensive Waiver Supports Program affect the Personal Preference Program?
That's a good question. I don't believe that I've seen any actual literature on that from the division. It looks like they're actually trying to move everything in this direction. So that's going to be one of those answers that's going to have to be a wait and see how things play out. Unfortunately, we don't have all the answers at this point because this topic is very new and the changes are still happening, right as we speak. Sorry.
That's okay. Will the contracts that DDD has with providers and services go over to DCF?
Yes, that is the plan. Everything that is happening currently with DDD, with the younger group of children, when it moves over, it's supposed to be completely seamless. The contracts will simply switch, but that should be something that should be completely invisible to parents. And the funding source will switch, so DCF will be now paying that. But the provider agency that's giving you your behavioral support right now should remain the same agency. Nothing should really look any different to the families when it starts in January. It's all going to be behind the scenes.
Okay. My son receives, I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm trying to read these questions, and there's so many questions coming in. It keeps moving up. My son receives psychiatric care through DDD in Stratford at UMDNJ. I have heard this contract was not going to be renewed in favor of getting psychiatric care through the HMO. My Medicaid HMO has very limited psychiatrists and virtually none with experience with children or adults with developmental disabilities and mental health issues. Is this something that is truly going to happen?
There has been a lot of talk about a number, not just in this area, but a number of different healthcare providers have been raising these questions. Again, this is another one that we don't fully know the answer to. There will be effects from this change. I don't know the answer to that, whether or not that specific contract would be renewed or not. Again, these are some of the things that we're going to have to kind of wait and see. But it does seem like there are going to be changes in some contracts. Some providers don't want to end up switching over to the Medicaid system. Because it does limit fees. So that's a tough question. I don't really know the answer to it. It's one of those things that's in flux right now, too.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what happens to children under 15 who need emergency residential placement?
As of January 1st, that will be handled through DCF. That would be, you need to call DCF, explain the situation and what's going on, and they would have to make their assessment and make a determination of residential placement. Now, don't forget, DDD is not the only agency that residentially places children. DCF also has mechanisms for residentially placing children who were in the population that they were previously serving. So it's just going to be a matter that DCF would now be making the determinations and assessments as opposed to DDD. For this period right now that's been happening, even though the switchover in July brought anybody who was already residentially placed under DCF's umbrella, DDD remained the mechanism for making an emergency placement determination right up until the end of this year. But starting in January, that also switches over. DCF would be the primary, will be the only agency that will be providing these services, so it would go through their channel. So you would need to call their intake hotline and start the process with them for an emergency placement.
Okay, our next question is, Social Security is in the process of determining my 18-year-old son for SSI. If rejected and we appeal, will he lose his DCF status?
No. Okay. So your son who's 18 years old is probably not in DCF. But even so, DCF does not require Social Security or Medicaid for their funding. That's a DDD upcoming requirement. And if he's denied for Social Security, the determination of why he's denied is going to be important because, again, we're back to wanting Medicaid eligibility. So if this is a very fact-sensitive question. So it would depend if he's being denied because he has resources or income that are too high. That's going to be a problem for DDD providing services because, again, DDD wants to provide services under Medicaid. If there's another reason that he's being denied, you'd have to look at that and see. But it wouldn't affect anything from DCF. It would only affect DDD eligibility for his services that he would get from DDD because they're the ones who are looking at everything being under the Medicaid waiver, not DCF.
Okay.
Another question?
Sure, we got tons of them. Who will be helping families with guardianship, DCF or DDD?
At this point, neither DCF nor DDD helps families with guardianship. DDD used to help families with guardianship, but that stopped a number of years ago. And I do not believe that DCF is picking up that service, and neither does DDD. Guardianship is something that families have to do on their own at this point. You can hire a private attorney to do it. Some people do try to do it themselves. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not something that DDD has. DDD no longer offers guardianship services.
How do I continue a self-hire? I have been told that I must hire supports through an approved agency.
Yes, this is also something that's going to change. As I had mentioned before, for DDD to provide services, the individual has to be eligible for Medicaid, the service has to be a waiver service, and the provider has to be approved. So all providers will have to be approved Medicaid providers. So in the past, I know they had some programs where you could hire somebody that you knew or an individual. You can still do that, but that person has to go through the Medicaid provider route and actually become an official Medicaid provider. So it's not just like you can hire somebody down the block and you can use your self-directed dollars for that. They're going to have to be approved Medicaid providers. Now, you're not just kind of thrown to the wolves where you get this budget and you have to figure it out by yourself. You get a support coordinator, and the same thing is going to happen under the supports program. There'll be a support coordinator who helps you navigate how to spend that extra part of your budget and how to find a provider for the day program part of your services. So you will have help and support in doing this, and they will have lists of individuals who will be able to, who are approved, and they will know which services are approved, and they will help you navigate that system.
Thank you, Maria. The next one is, what exactly do employment services consist of? Job search, job coaching, follow-up services, and who will be able to provide these services?
Okay. So I think the question is based on the DVD's focus now on employment. So yes, it's going to include basically the same type of services that are out there now. So when they talk about employment services, it could be a sheltered workshop. It could be supervised employment. It could be a job coach. It could be training so that you are in a position to take on a particular job. It could be helping you find the job, keep the job. So it's all of those things that DDD is currently doing. Those types of services will continue, and that's what they're looking at as employment services. Now, of course, they know that not everybody is going to be able to take on that level of employment. So there's still going to be day programs that are not necessarily employment-based, but maybe enrichment-based, or to help with activities of daily living, or recreation-based, because not everybody is a candidate for certain levels of employment, but they are trying to focus on having as many people as possible move towards working in some capacity. So it's all of those things that would be employment services.
Okay, we have a question in regards to the Special Needs Trust. It says, currently I have a Special Needs Trust with a state trust. Can custodial account monies transfer to the Special Needs Trust? And it also has a follow-up. It says, just to clarify, if I have a 529 Special Needs Trust plan in my name and I'm assuming Social Security, it says, and SS, I can transfer custodial account held in brokerage house monies into the Special Needs Trust? That's sort of a long one, I know.
Yes. Okay. Let me just think this through for a second. So I think what the person's saying is that they have two different accounts. One is a 529 plan, which is a specific type of plan that's set up for saving for college. And it sounds like they're saying they have that in a trust.
I'm going to reread the second part. Again, I apologize. I know it was a little lengthy. It says, if I have a 529 Special Needs Trust plan in my name and SS, I can transfer custodial account held in the brokerage house monies into the Special Needs Trust? I guess it's saying, can I transfer custodial account, which is held in the brokerage house, monies into the Special Needs Trust? Is that a possibility?
Possibility. Okay. The 529 plan, if the owner of the plan is the parent and not the child, then those are the parent's funds, and that can go into a third-party Special Needs Trust because those funds are the child. So you'd have to look at the 529 plan and see what the rules are, because they may have specific rules on how that money can be used, because it's actually put into that plan based on it being used for higher education, and there are tax benefits that were gotten when you were putting the money into the 529. So that's a question you would have to answer first. If you're able to move the money out of there without a penalty and it's owned by the parent, then it can go into a Special Needs Trust because it's just parents' assets going into a third-party trust. If it's a uniform gift to minor account that's in a trust in a brokerage house, that's going to have to go into the other type of the Special Needs Trust, the one that we talked about before with the payback provision, because those funds have vested in the child itself, and therefore they would have to go into a Special Needs Trust with a payback provision. The answer may not be exactly to your question, mostly because I would need more information about the type of accounts. But if we can just kind of keep the two things clear, Third-party special needs trusts are set up with the assets that don't belong to the disabled individual. A payback trust is a special needs trust that is being set up with assets that actually vest in and belong to the individual with the developmental disability. So we can just keep those two things clear. That's the main part of the trust. I don't really understand from the question. I'm not clear on who's owning what in that, so I can't really say where that stuff would go. But the person who asked the question probably does know, so that should help them to figure out which of the two types of trust they would need.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what will happen for adults who currently have a self-directed budget? Will their budget amounts be changed?
A self-directed day budget, in theory, it should not change. What the division is trying to do is to carve out the daytime activities and have that be one thing, and then have kind of this carryover extra budget for things that would be above and beyond what's used during that day part. So no, I don't think so. I think it's more or less going to be the same. I don't think you're going to see a huge change in your services. The division is still, for those of you who have gone through this process and have self-directed, you've done that DDRT, the Developmental Disabled Resource Tool, which is the tool that allows the division to assess a level of budget for an individual. That tool is remaining the same. It's one of the few things that is not changing with all the other changes in the system. So it would make sense that budgets that were set on that are probably going to remain the same since they're still using that tool. Again, this is another kind of wait and see how it actually ends up working, but that's the way it appears that it would be working.
When will the individual providers have to become Medicaid-approved providers if you have a self-directed budget?
Immediately. As soon as the program is switching over, they only will provide services if all of those three things align. The individual is eligible for Medicaid, the service is a waiver service, and the provider is an eligible Medicaid provider. So the person would need to be doing that like right now. And for the most part, if your services are being provided through a provider agency, this is probably all fine. It's probably all already done. They probably have been Medicaid eligible, and if not, I'm sure the division is reaching out. And this becomes more of an issue if you have an individual person that you may be having give supports or services, but you do need to look into it right away.
Okay. What are the requirements for Medicaid eligibility? My daughter is 23 and receives SSI and is Medicaid eligible. My husband will receive Social Security as a retiree next year, and her SSI may be adjusted based on his Social Security history. Should we be concerned?
No, you should not. You do not need to be concerned, because this is the perfect example of the situation where someone would be considered a dual eligible. So she's already receiving SSI and is Medicaid eligible. At the point where her father retires and begins to collect Social Security, he'll be asked to fill out information about his children, and having a child who is a disabled adult child, you'll start to hear the term DAC, entitles the child to what is usually a higher benefit based on the father's work history. That higher benefit is considered unearned income for Social Security purposes because she's not working and earning that. Therefore, Social Security almost dollar for dollar reduces her Social Security, her supplemental security income by the amount that she's receiving. If that reduces her Social Security amount to zero, she will technically lose her Medicaid. However, as I mentioned before, there is a rule that says that if an individual is losing their Medicaid through Social Security based on the fact that they're getting old age survivor benefits, then they are still eligible for the Medicaid through the Board of Social Services. So your daughter would become what's called a dual eligible. She'll have Medicaid, and then after 24 months she would get Medicare. 24 months of being on your husband's old age survivor benefits, she would get Medicare, and she would be a dual eligible. But as long as you don't do anything else, as long as she doesn't start to save money and have resources over $2,000, she will remain Medicaid eligible. So you do not need to be concerned about that.
Thank you, Maria. The next question is, if having a custodial account prevents my son from SSI Medicaid eligibility, can I direct that custodial account monies into a special needs trust? Also, can I begin to charge my child rent and deduct from that money from the custodial account?
Did it say how old the child is? I'm sorry.
Let me see.
Is he over 8? It's okay. Okay, so if your child has a custodial account.
Maria, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at a previous question. Her son may be turning 18 in January.
In January, okay. If your son has a custodial account, first of all, Social Security, when they look for eligibility, they look at the moment that you're applying. So they don't do a 5-year look back. They look at the time that you're applying. So if the funds are gone before he's 18, if you use those funds for something for him, because if it's a uniform gift to minor account, you have to be using that for something other than what you're required to provide for him. So if there's something that you can use that for, you might as well just use it instead of saving it, so this way it's gone. If that's not the case, if it's a large amount of money and you can't do that, you can put it into a payback special needs trust, and then after he's 18, yes, you can use the funds in that trust for things that he needs, other than things that he would get from government benefits, because that's the criteria. If it's something that he would already get from government benefits, then you can't use the money in the trust for that. And you also can't use the money in the trust for food, clothing, and shelter, because those 3 things are considered to be income. So money taken out of a trust for those 3 things are considered or deemed income for purposes of Social Security and Medicaid, and will actually also jeopardize eligibility.
Okay. What if my son, who is 18 years old and is now in DDS, starts to ask for services? Will he be then placed back with DDD?
If you're with DDS, and this has always been the case, even regardless of this whole switchover, if you were with DDS and you did all of a sudden need services, the first step that has to happen is you call DDD and they pull your file back from DDS. So if your child's 18 and therefore not in the group that's being moved to DCF, but is in the DDS world, yes, if he needs services, you call DDD and they would pull his file back from DDS and then make a determination of whether or not he needs the services that you're requesting, whether or not they're available and whether or not he's eligible for them and whether or not he would get those services. So the answer is yes, they would pull him back from DDS into DDD.
Okay. What about children under 15 currently on the DDD community care waiver waiting list for residential placement?
Okay. I think probably what the question is here is what's going to happen with somebody who's 15 on the community care waiver waiting list, not at the top of that list, now being moved over to DCF. How does that impact his placement on the community care waiver waiting list? This is one of those open questions we don't have an answer to, whether or not the division's plan is to remove those individuals from that waiting list, because they're now in the world of DCF, or whether or not they will stay on that list, regardless of the fact that they've moved over to DCF. There's not a clear answer out there to that. This is going to be another one of those ones we're going to have to watch carefully and see what happens.
Maria, can you just describe to the attendees the process if someone wanted to obtain guardianship on their own?
Well, the process is the same, whether you go to an attorney or you try to do it yourself. The process requires that you petition the court. You have to have a verified complaint, which is basically a story that lays out information about the individual's disability, who wants to be the guardian, and why. You need 2 physician certifications that state that the individual needs a guardian, and 2 doctors have to be willing to sign off on that. All of this goes into court. The court will appoint an attorney for the for the disabled individual, and the reason for that is that person, they need an independent person to come in and actually talk to the developmentally disabled individual to ensure that they feel that he or she lacks the capacity and therefore needs a guardian. That court-appointed attorney will also talk to the individuals who are looking to become guardian to be sure that those individuals are the right people to be guardian. They will then put a report into the court, and then a judge reviews all of this and would make a decision on whether or not the individual needs a guardian. And if the individual does need a guardian, that the people who are asking to be named guardian are the correct people to be the guardian for the child. That's kind of the basic requirements for guardianship. And it doesn't matter if you're doing it yourself or if you're doing it with an attorney, you still have to provide the court with all of those things just so that they can make a decision. And what they're looking at is they're looking at the fact that the individual lacks the capacity to make decisions in the area of legal, financial, and medical decisions.
Okay, well, I'm sure that many of the families are loving this. It's definitely turned into an Ask the Attorney session, so I'm sure this is valuable for many of the families. Thank you. The next question we have is, if a family needs a porch lift for a child under the age of 18 who uses a power chair for mobility, can DCF provide this? DDD used to fund equipment for children.
Right. This is another one of those questions. It's a little difficult to answer because for the DCF feels that has stated that for the first year that they are going to be providing services for individuals with developmental disabilities who are being moved over. They're basically kind of maintaining a status quo of what individuals were getting. So what you would need to do in this would be to contact DCF, request, put in a request the same way you would do with DDD, and see what their response is. Again, remember, if you get a no, if you get a denial, these are all appealable issues. You can appeal their decision and take it from there. They will be providing similar services to what DDD had been providing. It's just for the first year, they're not sure exactly how it's all going to work because they have to figure out the mechanism for how they're going to respond to these kinds of requests. So it may be a little bit bumpy at the beginning, but eventually that should be something that they would be able to do.
Okay. Who will be case managing the children under the age of 18? I know it is through DCF, but out of what agency? And also to follow up that question, what experience do these case managers have with children with developmental disabilities?
Okay. So it's under DCF, you are correct, and the DCF is the Department of Children and Families, and there's a division of Behavioral Children Health Services, which will actually be the division that will be taking over the individuals with developmental disabilities. And it is my understanding that at this present time that they are in the process of hiring individuals who previously were involved with DDD and bringing them over, and also some individuals from other agencies that have been working in the world of the developmentally disabled, and having a core group that will have previous experience with individuals with developmental disabilities. So it's not that there's going to be a separate provider. It's going to be within DCF in the same way that when you call DDD, your case manager is a DDD case manager. You'll be dealing with a DCF case manager under the Division of Children's Behavioral Health Services. And those individuals, they are putting together a team of individuals that have dealt with the population of individuals with developmental disabilities. So they should have experience and understand what our needs in this area are. So it won't be like you're dealing with somebody who has no idea about developmental disabilities. Again, you're going to have to wait and see how it actually plays out, but this is what they're trying to set up, and hopefully they'll be successful in it, and hopefully it'll work well.
Maria, I want to thank you, and I do want to apologize to everyone's questions who we have not gotten to so far. If your question is legally based, I will by all means be forwarding that question to the law firm of Hinkle, Fingal, and Pryor. And Maria, I will absolutely see you on that email.
Okay.
If your question is looking for contacts or general information, or if you have information about the different service systems, by all means, we encourage the families to contact the Family Support Center of New Jersey office. Our local number is 732-528-8080. By all means, you could please ask for any of the resource coordinators. You can ask for myself, Melanie McGackin, and we will be happy to assist you with finding the information that you're looking for. On behalf of myself, my colleague Michelle Tyler, the Family Support Center of New Jersey, along with attorney Maria Fisher and the law firm of Hinkle, Fingles, and Pryor, I would like to thank you for joining us for this evening's presentation. Your feedback is important to us, so please look for your evaluation via email within the next 24 hours. Your input will help determine future topics, so we encourage you to complete this evaluation. This webinar will be archived on the Family Support Center of New Jersey website. That is fscnj.org for your future reference. So please have a wonderful evening and a beautiful night. Thank you.